thin skin, held up longer than I was falling.
Welcome to Center Stage, the documentary podcast. Each week, our group of intrepid researchers and music archivists dig through the record crates of the world, looking for that one artist to take center stage. Using a patent-pending algorithm and spirited debate, we pick one artist. Once that is settled, we invite that artist into Thunderlove Studio to chat with your hosts Keith R. Higgins and Jeff Calhoun. When we're lucky, they say yes. Our mission with Center Stage is simple: to make sure the recorded work of artists remains, or in some cases lands on, the cultural radar. We invite you to sit back and relax. Thank you for joining us.
This morning with a bad hangover, and my penis was missing again. This happens all the time, it's detachable. This comes in handy a lot of the time. I can leave it home when I think it's going to get me in trouble, or I can rent it out when I don't need it. But now and then I go to a party, get drunk, and the next morning I can't, for the life of me, remember what I did with it. First I looked around my apartment and I couldn't find it. So I called up the place where the party was, they hadn't seen it either. I asked them to check the medicine cabinet, cause for some reason I leave it there sometimes, but not this time. So I told them if it pops up to let me know. I called a few people who were at the party, but they were no help either. I was starting to get desperate. I really don't like being without my penis for too long. It makes me feel like less of a man, and I really hate having to sit down every time I take a leak.
And we're on.
Oh my goodness. Keith R. Higgins. Let's talk about our guest. Welcome back, by the way, to another episode of Center Stage. John S. Hall. If that name does not immediately resonate, he was I guess you would say he was the brains. He was the vocalist. He was the writer for all of the songs, all the jokes in the band King Missile. And King Missile probably rings a bell because they wrote the ubiquitous Detachable Penis. Let's not think of this group like a one-hit wonder. With apologies that John is nerdy in the same ways that I am. And so if you want to talk about modern literary criticism and get into Lacan and Derrida, I'm your guy. Let's go down those rabbit holes. It's not for everybody. I get it. We're gonna be all over the place with John today. We're gonna talk about the early stuff, the late stuff. We're gonna talk about Detachable Penis, how it influenced the band and what it did to their career, and all the crazy jokes that that band pulled off over the years, because they were consistently funny, consistently edgy. It's a band that means a lot to me as a young person, being exposed to new ideas and being around a lot of people that wanted to eschew social norms.
Ah, yes.
Say that 3 times fast. Eschew social norms. For people who I think are tuned into the fact that there's a different way of looking at the world, this is going to be a really interesting conversation. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. I think if you only know Detachable Penis, you're going to come away with a much broader understanding of the late 90s musical landscape and how they fit into it. It's a cultural milestone. It's more than just Beavis and Butthead. I promise you.
Thank God for that.
Thank God. Thank God for substance. Put your thinking caps on, listeners. Here is our conversation with John S. Hall. Our intent with the time that we have is to try and capture, in as much as we can anyway, a sort of retrospective of your musical career. And to do that, we've got to go all the way back to even pre King Missile in mid 1980s, when you were performing really as a poet, if I understand it correctly. What was the impetus for turning poetry and that style of performance into a band?
Well, I can answer that question, but if you really want to begin at the beginning, there was a band before that.
Oh, what band? What am I missing?
There's a band called You Suck. That was the first band I had, and it was a bad cover band, and we would do bad songs badly. Barry Manilow, Total Eclipse of the Heart. We did, stuff like that.
Okay.
Whatever was awful and on the radio at the time, we would attempt a terrible version of it. And we did an audition night and thought that would be the end of it, but Michael Board was there, and he was one of the inspirations for that band. Probably the main inspiration for that band. And he decided to produce a single, which was not a very good single because it wasn't a cover. Like, it was a single with two originals on it. One song was called the You Suck Chant, and the other was called the Get the Fuck Off the Stage. I don't know if you can get those recordings online. The single had a pornographic cover, very disgusting, and none of us liked it, but Michael thought it would be funny. The band lasted about a year. Hilly Crystal at CB's really liked it, and he kept booking us. And I think it would have kept going, but I at that time was really far more into drinking than doing anything else. And that was actually why I conceived of a band that would be intentionally bad, so there wouldn't be much pressure on me to do anything good. So yeah, we played a bunch of shows. And skipping ahead, actually, King Missile Dogfly Religion has a new record that we're working on, and Dog Bowl has written a song that takes place during a You Suck concert. He was in You Suck as well. So,
oh wow.
In fact, You Suck had, basically anybody I knew would play in You Suck, and a lot of the members didn't play instruments. The guy did a Rubik's Cube, another guy had like a fish on a fish hook on a fishing line, and the people playing chess, anything we could fit it on the stage. So that was like the first thing I did. And then when that broke up, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I went up for a summer session. I had been thrown out of college, but I decided to try college again. I went up to a summer session at Cornell University, and I took a verse writing class by accident. I went up there to take a class about pop music because I wanted to learn more about how to write pop songs. And that class was canceled when I got up there. So as long as I was there, I'll take something. So I took verse writing. Hadn't really thought about poetry until then. But the structure of that class was that 4 of the 5 days, it met 5 days a week. And on Wednesdays, we'd discuss a particular poet. But on the other 4 days, you would read poetry that you wrote. And I liked that format, and it inspired me to write a lot of poetry. And when I got back to New York, I decided I wanted to go back to college, and I also decided that I wanted to try poetry readings. And I tried poetry readings, and it went well. And after a couple of poetry readings, I got booked as a feature, and that made me nervous because, like, doing 5 minutes seemed like something I could handle, but doing 20 minutes by myself, I didn't even want to attempt it. Not at that point anyway. And so I asked Dog Bowl if he would write music to some of my poems. And he did. And we did our first performance. And that went well. And then we added a few more musicians. R.B. Corbett on drums and Alex DeLaslo on saxophone and harmonica. And that was the band. we played for a couple of years, and then my father died. I was 26, and I got a little bit of inheritance money, so I decided to make a demo with King Missile Dogfly Religion. And the guy who I got to hire, Michael Board, suggested two people, Wharton Tears or Michael Board, and I chose Wharton Tears or Kramer, and I chose Kramer because Michael said Kramer would do it faster and maybe sloppier, not as perfect. And Wharton would do like maybe a better job, but would take longer and be more expensive. So I went to the quick and sloppy, and but Kramer happened to be starting a record label at that time. He had just finished the first release, I think, or the first two releases, and he asked if we would like to be the third release. And that sounded good to me because I wasn't sure how I was going to shop around any records. Shop around that record. So we went with it, and that record got some airplay. Had a Sensitive Artist and Take Stuff from Work and Woof and Wuss and Muffy, and all of those got college radio airplay. So we did another one, and that one didn't get as much attention, but it had Mr. Johnson on it and a bunch of other songs that I liked. And then Dog Bowl left, and Dave Rick became the guitarist and became a whole different band. But now I'm up to like 1990, and I'm still recording with Kramer, but with like a more like of a rock band rather than this quirky kind of saxophone harmonica. And then the second album had like cello and polyrhythm, a couple of drummers and other things. But both of those records sounded strange and unconventional, not the kind of music that anyone was listening to at that time. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, they don't strike me as dated as some of my later records did, which were really kind of like the hard driving guitar sound and conventional guitar bass drum configuration. But a lot of music that I'm happy with, we made at that time. My Heart is a Flower, Detachable, Martin Scorsese, the Indians, which was really just drum. There are a couple of things that were just drum and vocals during that period that I thought came out well. One is It's Saturday from the King Missile self-titled album, and the Indians from The Way to Salvation. It was Scotland is on one of the records. It's just a cappella, Yep. So there was still room for experimentation. Gary and Melissa was just vocal and guitar. Jesus Was Way Cool was just vocal and piano. So even within like the configuration, we experimented with sparser arrangements or less conventional arrangements. And after we made Mystical, we got signed to Atlantic for 3 records, and that's how that's really probably why I'm here today, right? Like if that hadn't happened.
I don't know. I'll press you on that point because my entry point to the band, and I'm curious to know if you can think back to those early records on Shimmy. For me, your music, your art was a rite of passage within certain communities. If you ever wanted to find a tight cluster of King Missile fans, you need look no further than a high school debate tournament or a math competition, because it seemed to be wherever the smart kids were congregating, they were passing around tapes and CDs of King Missile. Did you feel that? Did you feel that connection with a very niche audience back then?
Well, I mean, most of the colleges that we played at were pretty good colleges, or we'd play, the college towns like Chapel Hill and what have you. I was asked to do a reading at Yale once, and I think we also did a show at the Rathskeller at Columbia University, and trying to think. There are a few other like names I could drop in terms of colleges. I don't really know. Like I had no way of judging the relative intelligence of our audience, but I do know that like occasionally we'd be on the bill with other bands, and I guess some of their fans seemed like different from ours. Let's put it that way. So yeah, maybe that's right. Yeah.
So for a lot of people, when they pick up a guitar and try to first learn the instrument, they're going to take inspiration from, I'm going to learn how to play a Beatles song, or I'm going to learn how to play, Wonderwall by Oasis. For my peer group, we were picking up the guitar and we were playing Muffy and inserting, our peers' girlfriend's name into the songs. We were playing Wuss and just having a blast with it. And then, as you say, when Mystical came out and Jesus Was Way Cool was really, to us, a major hit and a big success.
Jesus was way cool. Everybody liked Jesus. Everybody wanted to hang out with him. Anything he wanted to do, he did. He turned water into wine, and if he wanted to, he could have turned weed into marijuana, or sugar into cocaine, or vitamin pills into amphetamines. He walked on the water and swam on the land. He would tell these stories, and people would listen. He was really cool. If you were blind or lame, you just went to Jesus, and he would put his hands on you, and you would be healed. That's so cool. He could have played guitar better than Hendrix. He could have told the future. He could have baked the most delicious cake in the world. He could have scored more goals than Wayne Gretzky. He could have danced better than...
And that's also around the same time. I mean, as we're learning to play our instruments and we're playing Wuss and Muffy and these songs, we're watching you and your group evolve and get access to better gear and become better players and recruit different players. So by the time we heard Hard as a Flower, we're like, oh my God, they're ready to open for the Rolling Stones. We thought you guys had arrived.
That's interesting. I never chose people on the basis of their musicianship. I asked Dog Bowl to work with me because I thought he wrote great songs himself. And part of my agenda was that if Dog Bowl was in the band, we could cover his songs. I mean, I could have covered his songs anyway, I suppose. But I just thought, like, he knew the songs and he knew how to play them. So, so that was my agenda with him. And, the drummer was my girlfriend at the time, and Alex, I don't know where he came from. I think he was from the Dog Bowls, So that was the first band. And then Charles Curtis, who played cello on the second record, Juilliard trained, brilliant cellist. You can't really hear how great he is on that record, I think. But like Hemophiliac of Love has, I think, 3 cello tracks on it, and you can sort of get a sense of how great he is. But I think Kramer didn't do a good job of like presenting what Charles did. But I chose him because he was the only cellist I knew. And I knew him because he lived with he was renting a room at Bianca's apartment. Bianca was the person who started You Suck with me. And Charles played in You Suck too. He played cello in You Suck. So that's why I had them. And the reason I had Dave Rick was because one day I did a show and Dog Bowl was sick. He couldn't make it. And Dave Rick filled in at the last minute. and that worked out good. So then when Dog Bowl left the band, he was really the only guitarist I knew, and that's why I chose him, and then he chose the rest of the musicians. The thing is, I only very recently started to learn anything about music and how to play and how to structure songs myself. I've been writing songs myself for about 4 years, but before then, I didn't really know anything about music or musicianship, and I really wasn't that good at judging. And I was probably stupid enough to think that, well, if you could play, you could play anything, putting the idea of virtuosity, being a virtuoso aside, putting aside that, like, if you could play reggae, you could play funk, you could play rock, whatever, and I think what I would have wanted ideally from any musician was some kind of versatility, eclecticism, etc. Much more important to me than actual, chops, as they say. But with that said, it's true that musically, Dave Rick is a better guitar player than Dog Bowl. I mean, Dog Bowl will be the first to admit it. With that said, though, I always enjoyed working with Dog Bowl better because we had very similar sensibilities. Dog Bowl wrote beautiful melodies, and Dave Rick is a great player, but I think Dog Bowl is a better writer, of melodies. So I think both configurations had their strong and weak points. And then there was a third version of King Missile called King Missile the Third, and that was going back to more of the quirky ideals with like a guy who played homemade instruments, including this Pencilina, was this electric string instrument, and we had violin, and the guest musicians could have been anything. Like I think we had like some bassoon or saxophone on a few of the tracks, and like those records were my least successful, but there's some good stuff on that too. A song called Failure, song called Get Down with the Funky Shit that I always liked, but nobody else liked. I forget, but there's a lot of stuff on there. Oh, The Little Sandwich, developed a guilt complex because he was a sole survivor of a horrible bus crash. That's a really fun one. That has a different cello player on it, James Scarpantoni, who I met, when her band Tiny Light opened for. No, I think we opened for them. Yeah, and I just fell in love with her playing first time I saw her perform on stage, and we worked on that on a couple of records together. So anyway, yeah, that would be my lengthy answer to your question about musicianship. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't looking for better musicians. But I got better musicians, but songwriting, like there are some brilliant moments songwriting wise on those records. I think, again, like most of the ones that you're familiar with are among my favorites too. Gary Melissa, Jesus, Detachable. Detachable wasn't written to the lyrics. Sometimes they write to the lyrics, but in that case, I had Detachable for a while. I had written it like at least a year earlier, maybe 2. I wrote it before the previous record came out. I remember that. But they hadn't come up with the music that I felt was right. And then we were jamming for the next record, Happy Hour, and they had that little jam. And I thought that will work for Detachable. So, I'm forgetting. Martin Scorsese there's 2 different versions, and I think they're both pretty great. There's like a rock version, and then there's this one with like a lot of drum programming that the drummer did, and so on and so forth. So there were some great musical ideas on those records. But I still, I found it much more satisfying to sing melodies that Dog Bowl came up with. I'm trying to think how much singing versus spoken word there is on those later records, and there's title track and a few others, but a lot of the time I'm talking because I can't really hear a fun melody to sing. But if you think about They and the stuff Dog Bowl wrote there, I'm singing on a lot of it, a lot of things that were originally written as spoken word pieces, like Now and I'm Open and the Blood Song and so on. It was very easy to sing along to the music that Dog Bowl was writing, and it was harder for me to sing along to most of what Dave, Rick, and company were writing. So I did less singing.
I wonder if, upon reflection of Ed, if you were to chart a narrative story arc for Ed, you kind of have 2/3 of the song where there is some, I guess, existential crisis. and then part of the way through, the story reveals there is no life on this planet. It was all replaced by machinery, by Jehovah One. I wonder if the Wachowskis have sent you a commission check for planting the idea of the Matrix in their heads.
Well, those ideas and probably the Matrix came from the same place, probably, which was the writings of the Church of Subgenius. I wrote Ed in the van after having spent the night at Sterno's house. Sterno was one of the people in Subgenius. He wasn't a pope. Like you had to pay money to elevate to the next level to the Church of Subgenius. And he was whatever, it was like maybe a bishop or something in the Church of Subgenius. And so we had played Baton Rouge, I think is where we played, and that's where he was. And, we often liked to crash at people's houses after the show. We save money and we'd have like a good time usually, And so this guy invited us to his place. And he was a Subgenius guy, and he had all these books. And I spent several hours reading the material. So that part of the story was lifted, from Church of the Subgenius.
I was unfamiliar, so thank you for that.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm getting a lesson. My jaw is just like, huh? I'm learning an awful lot.
The Church of the Subgenius most certainly has a Wikipedia page, and it's interesting to read it. I've always wondered about the relationship between the Church of the Subgenius and the Principia Discordia, which was written by Robert Anton Wilson under a pseudonym. But there seems to be some overlap there as well. But yeah, I didn't have enough energy. This was like when I was doing all that kind of stuff. This was before the internet where you could just Google something.
Yeah.
But, perhaps if one were to Google Robert Anton Wilson or Hakim Bey, that was another one of his names, and Church of the Subgenius, you might get a hit. I wouldn't be surprised.
Hail Eris. Religion, Dogfly religion, the church comes up in your work often. I'm curious to know about your upbringing. What was your religious experience as a young person? It obviously, exploring the ideas of religion has been something that you've done your whole career.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people don't. I think, my interest in religion, which started probably at 9 or 10, I never really resented religion. Like, I had bad experiences with religion in kindergarten, because I went to a Catholic school for 4 years. So kindergarten through third grade. And that was a bad experience. But fortunately, on Sundays, I was going to Presbyterian Sunday school. And so what I learned early on was that the stories could be similar, but presented differently. And that one could be operating from the same texts and have very different approaches to, like, how to live one's life or how to behave or whatever. So even though they're both Christians, the Catholic parochial school and the Presbyterian Sunday school, I could see the difference. And that communicated to me at a pretty early age, probably 12 or 13, that there was no one right answer. So I never took religion to be telling me I had to believe in a certain way. Rather, I took it to be a road on which to explore, one of many roads, and that one could look at multiple roads at the same time. That's one. But two is like the mystical traditions of various religions. I think the first person who I considered to be a mystic, this is only occurring to me now, was Jesus. There's mystical dimensions to the way he talked and the way he told stories, and maybe to the way he behaved. I don't think he was as much of a mystic as some of the other mystics I later came to learn about. But but like, the idea behind Jesus is way cool. Why is he cool? In part, at least, because he's a mystic, and I think mysticism is cool. So the mystical traditions of the various faiths was very interesting to me. And I read, stuff by the Sufis, and I read Christian mystics, like Saint Teresa, Saint John of the Cross. And then, and The Cloud of Unknowing was a book that had a lot of influence on me as well. Great Christian mystical text. And Kabbalah later, and Jewish mysticism, and Hinduism. When I was 14, a Hare Krishna handed me an album that he said was produced by George Harrison, and I didn't believe him, but I bought the record. Turns out it was produced by George Harrison, and I learned, and it had that record had. It had the Sanskrit, and then it had phonetic Sanskrit, and then it had translations, right? So I used to play that record over and over again because singing those songs, and like, the songs would end in these chants. Like, one of the chants, the two of the chants are on the song title track, right? One is Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami, which means I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. But on this record, they say it like 50 times, and it gets faster, and it gets, and I used to sing along to this record. A title track is like, the lyrics to title track actually are, so I misspoke. The lyrics to title track are just one song from that album that was produced by George Harrison. So Venum Kanvantam Aravinda Dalaya Taksam Barhavatamsa Masita. I learned that when I was 14, and I decided we'll just put music to that, and then we'll say this is it. This is mystical shit. Then we had another song on that record called Open, and that had that same chant, Govinda Madi Purusham Tamamashi. And it also had the chant from that same album, um, um, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radhara Manahari, Govinda Jaya Jaya. That was the entire song on the album, was that repeated over and over and over again, in this kind of, mystical sounding Indian voice. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radhara Manahari, Govinda Jaya Jaya. Now, these songs, you can also Google them and look them up, if one is so inclined. But, later I came to learn, that, George Harrison, who was my favorite Beatle, still is, did similar kinds of, spiritual searches, and one of the things he said that I took to heart kind of, and then didn't, was he said that drugs showed the Beatles, what was possible, in terms of mystical states. But then they came to a point, or at least George claimed he came to a point where he didn't need the drugs anymore. And so he got involved with the Maharishi, the transcendental meditation guy, and he got involved with the Krishnas, and he ended up producing one of their records. And he learned the sitar, and got into that kind of like, I associate the sitar and the tambura and those instruments with like a kind of mystical, psychedelic feeling,
Sure.
So I was really attracted to that music as well. So as a young child, I was interested in Jesus and Christianity, but I was also interested in what other people believed, why they believed it. And I read a bunch of their literature. I listened to some of their music. And, I didn't mention Buddhism, but like later on in my life, I did Buddhist meditation for many, many years. And for the last 5 years, 4 years and change, I've been doing transcendental meditation, the Maharishi. So, this interest in religion has never really left me. And I do think, I'm fond of saying, and I've probably said it in other interviews before, that like religion addresses questions that no other discipline can approach, because the religious approach to life is a different, it's a different approach than the secular approach or the scientific approach or the philosophical approach. Religion is about surrendering to something that you don't understand. It's really like synonymous with just taking a leap of faith, and trusting, and it's counterintuitive, and it has been, at least since Darwin, to place one's faith in something that we don't feel like we can know. Actually, I should say since Francis Bacon, really, scientific method. It's counterintuitive these days for us to place our faith in things that we can't explain or quantify or test, but that's what religion asks us to do. And in exchange for doing that, I have found that you can get great rewards, but I do emphasize that one should, work out their own path. No, that's not what I mean. One should look around and see what resonates. And if a particular path resonates, then by all means go with it. I'm pretty happy with transcendental meditation right now, but it doesn't ask very much of me in terms of like a philosophy. So I do feel like right now there's arguably something missing. But maybe not, I still have tons of books that I can read, and I have people I can talk to about Buddhism or this or that or the other thing if I want some questions asked or if I want a new discipline. So, yeah. That's my answer. That's my long answer to the religion question.
I also practice TM, and one of the things I like about it is that it doesn't ask a lot of you.
Well, when I first started doing TM, I thought this can't possibly be it. Like it just doesn't seem like enough, because I had done like maybe 15 years of Buddhist meditation where you did other things, like there's the metta bhavana practice in Buddhism where you generate loving kindness to all sentient beings, and that seems to me to be like a really beautiful thing to try to do. And that's a 20-minute meditation, but it's guided, towards various people in your life and then outward to like the whole world, right? And then in that same, another kind of Buddhist meditation is mindfulness meditation, which is much more focused on the idea of trying to let go of thoughts. Whereas in TM, it's not as disciplined. If a thought comes, you let it go. Yeah. But with the mindfulness, I don't know, for whatever reason, it seems to me like it was a more intense practice, and I felt like I had to work harder at like, at letting go of thoughts. And consequently, I found it more satisfying at the beginning, at least. I thought, oh, this TM isn't as satisfying. But one thing I'll say for TM is that I do it every day. And I never had a practice before that I did every day, and I do it every day because it's easy, Yeah. It's easy enough to do every day. So
the self, and I don't want to dwell too much on happy hour because I'm sure that you've talked about Detachable until you're blue in the face. I feel like the self-titled record that followed it really sees you at your peak in terms of exploring. I've read it described as absurdist. I think you're exploring a lot of sort of the linguistic side of our experience, with going so far as to say Jacques Lacan, signifier, signified. I think you play with that idea a lot, and then exploring some of the things that have been themes your whole career, violence being one of them. I think you get both that signifier, signified wordplay and violence on the commercial, which is so unique and different. Can you tell me a little bit about that interest in exploring the extreme violence that we hear in the commercial?
Lately I've seen red, I've tasted blood, I've killed with words, I've wished and hoped and swam through a river of snot twice as wide as the mighty Mississippi. But I want to know about the commercial I saw on TV. An Irish guy walking through a field of green, whistling one of those Irish jigs, and a woman walks up and says, "Manly, yes, but I like it too." Then the guy pulls out a huge knife and cuts off his first two fingers and somehow catches them in what's left of his left hand and hands them to the woman. Did I mention they're both dressed in green? Then they both sing this song together. Aria icky, aria sticky, aria hot as anything. Hey, cut off two of your fingers and stab yourself in the eye. Then he stabs himself in the eye and hands her the knife and she stabs herself in the eye, okay? Okay, so what about that? Then they join arms and do this Irish folk dance while taking turns dismembering each other. This was a commercial for deodorant, I think, or soap or something. So now all the...
I just recently started rewatching the early Saturday Night Live, like the first few seasons, which, I embraced as a child, not as a child, as a teenager, right? Those came out and I watched them live, when they came out. And there's a there's a sketch where Dan Aykroyd is playing Julia Child and he accidentally cuts his finger off and there's blood everywhere. And then there's Michael O'Donoghue doing those impressions of people with the steel poles being rammed into their eyes. He did that like 5 times at least, you know, the last one being the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, where he got a whole bunch of people to pretend like their eyes were being like, you know, stabbed, that people were being stabbed in the eyes with these steel rods. I forgot what he said they were, but so that kind of humor, that particular kind of humor, I think comes directly from Saturday Night Live. There was a little bit of it in Monty Python too, but
Sure.
But really, I think that Saturday Night Live, you know, like if you think about, you know, in what's the one, the Holy Grail, you know, and the guy gets his arm cut off, the other arm, the leg, like, you know, like, so I don't feel like I was doing anything particularly new there, but that piece was directly inspired by the Irish Spring commercial. And, you know, he takes a big knife and he cuts a piece of the soap, you know, and I guess I was thinking about it one day and I thought, well, what if he cuts off, you know, a finger, you know, instead, you know, and it just went from there. So, I mean, that's the simple answer to why that one exists. I don't think I was thinking of anything else, you know, and then I didn't know how to end it, right? So it's like the end of it just goes into this like this kind of sales pitch and then stop being such a selfish piece of snot or something like that. But like, I don't know why. I just like it turns the same way I'm Sorry turns on the whichever album that's on, you know, where it starts with I never did this, I never did that, and then it just turns into I'm sorry and reasons that I'm sorry, you know. So like I start doing one kind of list and then I switch to another kind of list. That those are called, like, I guess they're called list poems. He Needed is another example of that kind of poem, but it doesn't change. It just goes right through.
Yeah.
I still write poems like that. It's fun because like you can alternate between saying something serious and something really absurd or nonsensical. But yeah, I mean, you know, extreme violence can be funny. I mean, some of the violence in Tarantino films is meant to be funny, not, you know, and Goodfellas, you know, like, these were brilliant filmmakers, brilliant films.
You've already hinted at this, but I do want to explore it a little bit because I've seen a live performance of King Missile where you perform Socks, and it really is just you. There's no musical accompaniment, no drums. It's just poetry delivery. And then you hear it on the album and there's much more to it. So I'm curious about that chicken and egg relationship. Does the poetry come first? Does the music come first? It sounds like probably a mix.
I very rarely have written lyrics to music. I mean, it happened, I think Metanoia on Happy Hour was the music came first. But usually either they write music to my lyrics or I choose music they've written to put my lyrics into. But I almost always have the lyrics first. Socks was the way you saw it. That's how I used to perform it. And I like Socks on the King Missile album, but I feel as though it doesn't really get across what I do in the live performance. It doesn't work the same way, you know, because what's great about it on stage is the dynamics. You know, I'm screaming as loud as I possibly can. In fact, I'm screaming with like as much strength as I can muster. And then when I get to the quiet part, or it's not quiet, it's more like conversational part, it's hard for me to recover because I could catch my breath and whatever. But on an album, if I had done it that way, or I mean, I did kind of do it that way, but the music kind of like interferes with it, in my opinion. I just didn't think that worked musically as well as I wanted it to. And I think that was partly because I didn't assert myself about how I thought it should be, but I would have done it kind of like orchestral, like maybe psycho, theme, Bernard Herrmann type strings during like the shouting parts, and then more melodic chamber ensemble kind of music for the softer parts, towards the end. But one thing I will say is that it wasn't until the band got dropped from Atlantic and I stopped working with those guys that I began to even start to express opinions about how I thought the music should be or what the production should be like. First, I didn't have the grammar, and second, I didn't have the confidence in my opinions, But in terms of sound and music, I can't take credit for any of the success, and I don't really take the blame for any of the failures that King Missile, that any of the King Missiles have had musically or production wise, So like, if I don't like the way they sounds, I blame Kramer, Even if I had the confidence, he wouldn't have listened to me anyway. He didn't listen to anybody. And then like, what do I want to say? But similarly, for example, Detachable, right? We had a mix of Detachable, where Roger Murdoch, the drummer, he originally programmed drums for it. And also, the first mix, the first final mix had programmed drums, and it had my vocals processed in such a way that they sat more inside the mix. They weren't as distinctive, right? And the record company objected. It was one of the only things they objected to. They said, put real drums on it and process the vocals differently so that you can hear the words, so that you can clearly hear the words. Those were, as far as I know, those are the only two things that the label cared about. It was that one song, because they heard a hit, which I didn't believe at the time. I thought it would be a college radio hit, but they thought maybe they would send it to alternative radio. That was their idea, right? So they get the credit for that. A man named Yves Bouvet and Todd Elmore at the radio in the radio department of Atlantic and Dave Rick for coming up with that groove. The only thing I can take credit for is when I heard that groove, I thought that would be good for Detachable. But the rest of it is like, I was lucky because the people I was working with, made good decisions. But other times, bad decisions were made. And again, it was, like me not asserting. So sometimes me not asserting myself was a good thing, and everything worked out great, and other times I wish I had said something, or I wish I had something to say. It's more like it, because I really didn't get to, I still don't know hardly anything about production, but Dog Bowl is a brilliant producer, and the new record that we're making sounds great, again, because of him. He's just making it sound phenomenal. I can't take credit for it.
I can't wait. I'm so excited. King Missile 3 and Failure, as you say, new roster, same John. You make a case for sort of the subjectivity of how we assign value and roles with gender and sex acts in the song Gay Not Gay. You know, trans folks being quite the target right now for our current administration. I'm wondering what a 2025 version of the song Gay Not Gay might look like.
Well, I think it'd be trickier now. I mean, at the time I was doing it, I didn't have any qualms about it because it seemed clear to me what it was. I mean, that song is about how fucked up straight people are about homosexuality, you know,
Yes.
how homophobic, particularly men, can be, you know,
Yes.
and how important it is to straight men that what they do can't get a gay label on it. So they'll make up, you know, loopholes, you know.
Yes.
and they'll come up with these strict definitions, and they'll draw these lines that they won't cross, and that keeps them on the straight side. And that to me was just a very funny idea.
I saw an episode of the Jerry Springer Show, and the topic was transvestites and the men who love them. And the guy was on with his girlfriend, and he was saying, to me, this is a beautiful woman. She's got a perfect body, beautiful blonde hair, everything. I love her, and I love making love to her. Now I ask you, does that make me gay? Most of the audience thought so, and so did I. But it got me thinking about what is and isn't gay. Discussing sex with a guy is gay. Discussing sex with a woman is straight. Even telling a woman, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to suck a cock, is straight.
And then there's also the whole idea at some point in the song where I'm talking about role reversal and and the woman penetrating the man and calling him denigrating him for being like a female, which is again, part of the patriarchal system, is that even, that even in a role reversal situation, sometimes it's still mimicking, male dominance, so the woman straps on a cock and she becomes the dominant one because she has a cock, and usually a bigger one than the guy has, right? So all of that's interesting to me, but I have to say, and later on, by the way, I had an entire band where all of the songs were about male sexual submission, but it started with things like the Leather Clown and that piece, the Gay Not Gay piece, and there are a few others where, Take Me Home on Happy Hour, these ideas where the woman is, female-led relationships, or, very masculine women and very feminine men. So what I found over the years is that, like, I like writing about sex, but it's not interesting to me, and it doesn't really reflect my sensibility to write like a heavy metal type cock rock song, like about a man being the aggressor. If you think about like the way Patti Smith sings Gloria, and she's really taking on the persona of a male, chasing after a woman, sweet young thing, oh, she looks so good, all that, like she's being the guy there, right? And for me, that works. But when a guy is being a guy singing those kind of lyrics, I find it very unappealing and kind of sad because it's conventional and it's often sexist, right?
Yeah.
So how could I write songs about sex without coming across like one of those guys, you know? Uh, and being male, right? Because if I'm female, I can, you know, Patti Smith can get away with that, you know, because she's reversing it, you know. So what can I do? Well, it seemed to me the only thing I could do was play a submissive role, you know, and most of the women in most of my sexual scenarios in my songs, the woman is dominant, you know, and the male is submissive, and I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that, and also there's another thing. It ties into the religious idea too, which Patti Smith also explored, right? The idea of submitting to God is analogous or it's adjacent to the idea of submitting to a lover, you know, and one can have this kind of religious devotion to a sexual partner. And so that was an idea. Can't think of an example in my work, but I often, when I'm singing the songs, I'm thinking of it in a more, you know, like it's an almost religious devotion, or it is a religious devotion to the woman I'm singing to. There's one other thing I wanted to say about the self-titled King Missile record, which is that I got voice lessons between the album before and that album, and I can hear the difference. You know, I was doing a lot of vocal exercises, and my voice was a lot stronger and less pitchy, and so on. So on songs like "Open Up" and "Tongue" and a few others, I'm singing in a way that I hadn't sung before. And I found that sometimes I find that record a little alienating, but most of the time I'm pretty happy with the vocal performances. I wish there was more good material on that record, but I blame me for that. Like, I don't think the lyrics on that record are as good as any of the records that preceded it. So some of my earlier songs are more complicated than my later songs because I started to feel bad that, like, because I didn't want to play them because I'm not a good player. But some of them are hard to play, even if you're a good musician, you know? So, like, in fact, I've worked with a couple of guitarists who had to look up some of the chords that I had.
Really?
You know, this is whatever. I can't remember what chords I was using. But anyway, I didn't realize, like, I didn't even know that about musicians, that like a lot of them will only know like 10 chords, you know? Whereas in my first year of playing, I just thought, oh, I want to learn chords. There's a really cute interview with Paul McCartney where he talks about that he and John had learned about this guitarist on the other side of town who knew a chord that they didn't know. I think it was G7 or I can't remember what it was, or G minor or something. And they took a bus, you know, to go meet this guy to learn that chord, you know, and then they went back home and, you know, ends up in their songs. But like, it's just so remarkable that like people, you know, that they were so devoted to learning music.
Yeah.
That they would do something like that. You know, it was just, for me, you know, if I want to learn how to play any song, like the chords are there on the internet for me to look up and how to play the chord. You know, so
I do have a question about a particular cover song.
Okay.
Still the One by Orleans. I couldn't find it to listen to it. Does that exist out in the world somewhere that I can actually listen to it? Because Jeff and I were humming it before you got on the call. We were singing it. I'm not going to lie.
How do you know it exists if you've never heard it?
According to the internet.
Oh, okay.
It's on your Wikipedia page.
It might be under Dance With Me, because what we did was, didn't we? No, what did we do? We mashed up two songs. Still the One and was it Dance With Me? It might have been. I think
another one.
we mashed up, so it might be under Dance With Me. I don't know, but the album was called. What was the album called? It was a K-Tel compilation. Oddly, I was talking about this record yesterday.
Oh, wow.
And I was saying, yeah, I'm happy with some of the. There's another record called "Surprise Your Pig," which was an REM tribute record, and we did what I thought was a not very good version of "Get Up." And there's also the Ruddles compilation record where we did Double Back Alley, slightly better than the REM. But Dance With Me, I think, I feel like we did a mashup of Still the One and Dance With Me.
Okay.
John Hall, who's the lead singer of Orleans, is the reason why I call myself John S. Hall, because he had a solo career and he played the Bottom Line, which was right near where I live. There were all these signs for John Hall. And I was like, oh, if I'm going to have a career, I better have a middle initial so that people know the difference. But John Hall and I are Facebook friends now. And he knows like Detachable, which I think is cool. Like these ridiculously famous people with these hugely huge songs. You know, I don't know who else, but like there are several people, you know, like the Ramones liked King Missile, and I got to meet a couple of them. You're just surprised that you'd be on anyone's radar. But, you know, I think David Byrne knows King Missile too.
Well, that tracks.
It's kind of cool. Yeah.
That tracks.
It's very cool. We have to say thank you to a guest of the show who really is the reason that I reached out, John, and that is Sleepyhead, who are label mates of yours, and I think they were performing there in New York. There was a festival over the summer. I looked at the lineup and I said, oh my God, John's performing with King Missile. We really should reach out. I think he would make for a fantastic episode. And you have. This has been very, very fun, and we're very thankful for the time. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
I'm sorry I went long, but, you know, it was fun.
Right. No, it was great fun. No, I appreciate it. I learned a lot.
Yeah. Thank you for all the music and entertainment. I've been a fan my whole life. So it's been an honor to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, you know, can I just say, Facebook, it's JSH John S. Hall. And on Instagram, it's John_S_Hall. And I post poems every day. Sometimes they're songs. So
fair enough.
Usually poems.
Can confirm, as someone that's been following you on Instagram for a long time, you're one of the most interesting and just a fountain, an endless fountain of creativity. I don't know where the nonstop inspiration comes from. You're something of a unique entertainer.
Yeah. Well, I'm dedicated to the process now, just to get up every morning and do it. So, yeah.
That's good. God bless
All right,
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
This was fun. Bye.
Many thanks to John for his time and sharing his stories.
This episode of Centre Stage was written and produced by Keith R. Higgins and Jeff Calhoun. The show was recorded at Thunderlove Studio, where it was engineered by
Daphne Morris,
with help from
Penetration,
edited by
Vic Titball,
with help from
Clem Fandango.
Our theme song is Cynical by Jaguar on Mars. You can stream Jaguar on Mars wherever you stream your favorite music. The songs you heard during this podcast were Detachable Penis, Jesus Was Way Cool, Ed, and The Commercial. Lastly, you heard Gay Not Gay. You can stream King Missile wherever you stream your favorite music. Please remember to support independent music.
original music by Mike Pellegrino.
If you like what you've heard, please remember to subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps other people find the podcast. Thanks for listening.
Grazie.
Bailey Leaf,
Rob Janicki, Mike Pellegrino, Farina Vella,
S.W. Loudon,
Michael Janicki, Peyton Janicki.
This show's executive producer is Lulu McGillicuddy and is in the loving memory of
Lucas Thunderlove.
And now, until we meet again next time, I remain as always, obediently yours.
Abandoned Albums is a production of Paw Print Media.